And hello, everyone. Welcome back to Coaching the Bible. Hope you had a glorious week. Yes, I sound better and I am feeling better, although admittedly, I don't look better this week than I perhaps maybe did last week, but I feel better than I did last week. This is season 5, episode 43, episode 256. The king is in the field, ladies and gentlemen. For those who know the reference, know what I'm talking about. If you don't know the reference is to the idea that we have reached the last month of the Jewish calendar year known as Elul, and we are closing in on the Jewish New Year. The high holiday season is upon us, and there's this idea that the king, meaning God, is in the field. God is out there. His people in the field, seeing what they've been up to, seeing what they're doing, meeting them, hearing from them, learning from them. The king is in the field. It's time to be prepared, time to get ready for the high holiday season that is coming in just a few weeks. So that takes us to this week's episode 256. The title of this week's episode is On the Limits That Make and Keep Greatness. We're going to zoom in for the next few weeks on a little bit of what I'll put in quotes, repentance, what I'll call return, and also what I'll call renewal. Because over the last almost 5 years of coaching the Bible, we've talked a lot about how to lead from crisis and how to lead from success, like we did recently, how to build trust that lasts, and how to aim for greatness, even when we're sort of teetering on the sense that either we don't belong or we feel uncertain. But every leader, no matter how strong or how visionary he or she may be, they face the same truth. You cannot just keep going forward without ever stepping back, because as you and I know, that leads to burnout. And when we have seasons of success, and they're wonderful, they don't last, and they are not renewable without taking a moment to recharge, to reflect, and to put ourselves in a position to go again. So that's where this comes in. So we're calling it what I'd like to use the term the anatomy. I feel like Nemo in being able to say the word anemone, the anatomy of return, because there's that cough again, because real renewal isn't one big moment. It's a system. And if we know how to prune back what's growing too wild, to repair a little bit what's being neglected, to retell the story a little bit again with some clarity and honesty, and then recommit together, not just as the leader, but as the team, then we have a chance at reestablishing the flywheel that is the success that we want. And it matters because as the holiday season comes in, we've done this. It's an annual season of reset. Who do I want to be? What kind of influence do I want to carry? What do I need to lay down, put aside? And what do I need to pick up again? Because if greatness is the goal, and I think on some level for many, greatness is the goal, or significance is the goal, or meaning is the goal, then I think renewal is part of that rhythm that makes it possible. Our portion of the week, known as Shoftim, starts this return by reminding us that greatness itself begins with limits. Long intro, but I think we're going to get to it right now. Let's dive in, please. Episode 256, here we go. Every kid, I think, dreams of the crown. They want the spotlight, they want power, they want the chance to lead, they want to be known, they want to be heard about. Today, they want to be popular, they want followers, they want an audience, all that stuff. But the hidden truth that we learn about only by reading books or watching documentaries or hearing the stories is that wearing the crown is heavy. And so even if we want that, that's great, but appreciate that when we put on that crown, it comes with weight, it comes with pressure, it comes with critics, it comes with temptations that perhaps you never imagined when you first wanted it. Right? Because in the dream sequence, it's just the pluses. It's not the nightmare scenarios, it's the pluses. It's all the glory that comes with the crown. And so the Bible tells us that you want to place upon yourself a king. On the surface, that sounds amazing. Whether that's communally or nationally, you want to have a king, or personally, you want to make something your king, a king for yourself. You want to put that crown on, you want to step into that role, you want to be great. But the next verses are all about limits. Don't multiply horses. Don't chase wives. Don't hoard silver and gold. And the Bible is telling us something very real and very important, which we're going to zoom in on wholeheartedly today in this first part of this series, which is the desire for greatness may be real, but the way that you sustain it and the way that you build it and the way that you grow it is actually through restraint and with limit. And the crown only holds if it rests on boundaries. So let's consider a few questions before we start. You're a leader already, a leader in your home, a leader in your community, a leader in your business, a leader in your friend circle, perhaps even. And do you recognize the weight of the crown that you wear in that space? The responsibilities, the scrutiny, the sacrifices that come with choosing to lead. And maybe if you're looking to lead even more, to lead at a much greater scale. Do you consider for a moment, or have you, the limits that might actually make you stronger? The boundaries that, if implemented and held to, word there in parentheses or in quotes, discipline, might actually enhance your opportunity at greater success and a larger crown, i.e. larger opportunities and larger wins. And on the flip side of that, which of the indulgences or which of the leniences or the weaknesses that are out there are actually quite weakening? Because when we have to put that lens to what we're doing or what we're aspiring to do, cannot simply just focus on I have to do A, B, C, D, and E to win. I have to also think about the X, Y, Z of what not to do, the limits, the commandments not to do as well. And then the largest question that relates to that, of course, is can you accept that discipline and limits are part of what will make you great? Not just the abundance, but the limits as well. I talked once before, a long time ago in Coaching the Bible, about the idea that the Sabbath, there are limiting activities. There are things we cannot do. And the idea of those limits are, as they're called in some of the literature, Jewish literature, fences that are put up, that the fences are what allow the garden to actually grow. Without the fences, then all of the enemies and all of the distractions and all of the problems get in, and that the fences sometimes are to our benefit. And so here's what happens. The Bible tells us in chapter 17 in Deuteronomy, the people have a request to place upon themselves a king. It's a nominal request. It's a legitimate request. It makes sense. We want what other nations have. They have kings. They have leaders. We want to look powerful. We want to play in the same sandbox and be invited to the same leadership conferences as the other nations. We want to stand tall among them. We cannot do that if we don't have a king. But I want to localize this idea and appreciate the language that it's not just about the nation putting upon themselves a king. It's about an individual who wants to put upon himself or herself a crown. I want to wear the crown of success. I want to have the title. I want to have the role. I want the platform. I want the wealth. I want all that comes with it, the celebrity, the power. And so when we normally most often think about it in the abstract, it's about putting a king on the nation, so it's distant from us. But when we localize it, it goes from if we had a king, we'd feel safe, to if I got promoted, then my worries would vanish. If I had the capital, financial wherewithal, I'd have nothing to worry about. I'd have security. And in the large, if we had a king, we'd be respected. And for the individual, it's about visibility and prestige, status. And if it's about the king, then if we had a king, perhaps decisions would be easier because the king would make them. That's outsourcing the responsibility. That the idea that the crown solves complexity rather than actually invite in complexity. Or that the last one, if we had a king, we'd stand taller against our rivals, that the kingship becomes more about dominance and power projection. But the reality of kingship is that it's weight, it's accountability, it's pressure, it's loneliness, it's a target on your back. I remember once listening to an interview of President Obama talking about the limits of being president of the United States, meaning that there are things you can no longer do ever once you step into that role, places you can never go again once you step into that role, the privacies that you might lose once you step into that role. Weight, it's heft. It's not just the office, it's everything that comes with it. So if you're going to step into the role, God says, you need limits to survive it. And so the Bible's wording is very precise. You place it upon yourself. If you want this, fine. Nobody's forcing you. If you want to dream bigger, if you want to chase the crown, if you want to step up, great. You're the one putting the weight on your shoulders. Good. But the truth is that it's not just about the perks, it's about the limits, the guardrails, the criticism, the scrutiny, the sacrifice. And so the Bible then says, if you want to put yourself upon yourself the crown, you want to wear the crown, you want to be the king, you want to be the queen, you want to be the chosen leader, then know that there are guardrails around the excesses. Number one, not too many horses. So in the biblical sense, that was about military might. But in the personal sense, it's a little bit smaller than that. It's don't build the empire for its own sake. Expanding the military or expanding your power simply because you can. The modern parallel for me was George Washington, who stepped down after 2 terms, had every opportunity to be king in all but name, and yet he chose and he enforced and he created culture around the limit. Now, that didn't become the law until much later on, but he set the precedent of restraint as it related to the restraint of power of the president that became foundational to American democracy. He appreciated that from the beginning. And I think in reading the biography of him and other articles about him, perhaps it preserved his personal legacy and at that point, national stability, because it was easy to lean into otherwise. So number one, not too many horses, not too much power. Number two, not too many wives, the Bible commands against. And the understanding was that it's about alliances and indulgences and distractions. Don't drown in the pleasures or the compromises. Don't multiply wives. Don't create endless entanglements that compromise your values. Not that your wives, God forbid, are any sort of an entanglement. But when you add that as the idea being for alliances or for simply just indulgences because of decadence, because you can, then you're compromising your basic fundamental values. And biblically speaking, we saw this in the guise of King Solomon. A modern parallel of a person who was careful about this as related to business, certainly, even though he had his mistakes and his share of failures. Jeff Bezos, for many years at Amazon, stuck to the core flywheel of what the business was about, which was a customer obsession, low prices, and fast delivery. He often killed ideas that looked great, the shiny new object idea, but if they diluted focus and they were simply just because we're Amazon and because we're big, because we can spend money or waste money, he often said no. He didn't always say no. Like every other one like that, they had their mistakes. So first, again, was the horses. The second is the wives. And the third one is not too much gold and silver. So the first one is about power and might. The second one is about alliances and indulgences. And the third one is about wealth. Don't define yourself by endless more. Hoarding gold and silver is not a metric that we consider important. And don't let the wealth become the end rather than the means. Having the wealth is a means to a greater end. It's not the end itself. Simply swimming through your money like Scrooge McDuck isn't any sort of a value that we hold dear. The great example is, I may butcher the name, Yvon Chouinard, who was the founder of the company called Patagonia, he gave the company away in 2022 to a trust dedicated to fighting climate change because it wasn't about his own personal wealth or his own personal status. The money was a tool for stewardship. Now, you can agree or disagree about the climate change issue. That's fine. But it's not a crown to sit on by and for itself. These three are not arbitrary bands. They are basically a psychological shield, and each limit cuts off a classic path of excess or hubris before it's allowed to take root. On the flip side, besides the three negative commandments, here's the positive command, which is that the Bible tells us that you as the king must also write for yourself a Bible and study from it every day. This is the thing. The king was commanded to write for himself a Torah scroll, a Bible scroll, keep it with him all the time, and read from it all the time. The crown by itself doesn't protect you, and the limits don't protect you. The scroll does. It's a requirement on a day-to-day basis. Renewal is a constant effort. It's a daily recalibration, which is hard, but is required for you to stay level-headed, focused, and service-oriented towards bigger means and bigger goals. An example here is Howard Schultz, who we've talked about a lot. He's a fascinating leader at Starbucks. He used to go on listening tours, and he would go there and he would carry a notebook with him, and he would write down what the baristas and the customers would tell him. On a regular, consistent basis, he was listening to the quote-unquote Torah, the voices of the people around him, so that he could stay focused, refocus, recalibrate, and renew. And so you have the limits, and then you have the upside of the active, what you have to do. And here then is the big insight. Without ambition, limits are unnecessary. If you're not looking to go anywhere, if you're not looking to do anything, if you're not looking to improve, if you're not looking to be something, do something, accomplish something, then you don't need limits. But the moment you decide that you want to, quote unquote, crown yourself with something, you want to be something, you want to do something, not out of the hubris side of it, the excessive pride of it, or the fame side, just I want to do something, success, leadership, whatever the case may be. The Bible says, stop, think, and fence it in. And so the renewal here, and this idea that we're talking about, this idea towards return here, isn't just really the dream bigger part. It's dream, yes, but have anchors. If you want to rise, awesome, but set restraints. Have humility if you want to carry that power. We'll talk more about that in a future episode. And so the underlying appreciation of what's going on here, I may go a little bit long today. Stay with me here. It's important. This is that season, but maybe we need a little bit more time thinking about these things. When we go under the hood and appreciate the psychology of it, of this idea of renewal through limits, of greatness through restraint, three quick principles. Number one is something called the hubris syndrome, which was coined by a gentleman by the name of Lord David Owen, along with psychiatrist Jonathan Davidson in the UK. David Owen was the UK Foreign Secretary at a certain point, but also a neurologist. And this hubris syndrome is an acquired personality change that only emerges after someone attains power and success. It's not the narcissism that we think about when somebody on the way in talks about how awesome they are and how great they are and how powerful they are. No, it's really the opposite. It's the person who puts on the crown because they want to wear the crown, because they actually want to accomplish, they want to do things, but only after they have it, the power that they now have triggers this inflated sense of self-confidence, this contempt for advice and oversight, this maybe perhaps impulsive risk-taking, downplaying of the constraints, the preoccupation with image and legacy over substance. We know this, we've seen this, we've read about it in books, we've seen it in movies. We know leaders who perhaps embody this type of idea of the hubris syndrome. And so it matters for us because the Bible actually anticipates this syndrome. Once you place upon yourself the king, you're stepping into a role whose very nature will invite drift because of all of the trappings that come along with it. So limit the military might, the horses, limit the indulgences and the alliances in the case of the wives, limit the treasures to silver and gold. Those three are what you might call the ancient on-ramps to that modern hubris of domination, distraction, and accumulation. So Lord Owen is warning success distorts the leader, but you can mitigate that. You can do something about that proactively, preemptively, and regularly by putting in restraint. So that's psychology number one. Psychology number two comes from Jim Collins, who many books, but in his book, And How the Mighty Fall, which was a book he wrote after the economic collapse, 2007, 2008, understanding institutional failure. Why did those companies fail? And so the first thing is exactly what Lord Owen is talking about, is hubris born of success. Leaders misattribute their success to themselves, and they often forget the discipline that created it. Like, it's super important and regularly important to evaluate the processes by which people got to greatness and not just what they do when they're great, because documenting and emulating and copying and working off of their processes to get to greatness helps you get there. But then secondly, appreciating what they're doing to stay there, very powerful as well. And so How the Mighty Might Fall, stage one, was this hubris born of success. Stage two was an undisciplined pursuit of more, which again goes back to what we talked about before, expanding into arenas that don't fit, growing because you can. That's the indulgences, that's distractions. For them, stage three was denial of risk and peril. Their warning signs were minimized because we got here. And so you see in the idea of what Collins is working on is an appreciation of the patterns of multiple failures in multiply great, formerly great institutions rather than the one-off cause. And so what happens with the Bible is the Bible cuts off these problems before they get there. No multiplying horses. Don't equate greatness with sheer reach of force. It checks off the undisciplined pursuit of more, which he talked about. No multiplying of wives. Don't mortgage the mission for alliances and indulgence. It prevents strategic drift. No multiplying of silver and gold. Don't shift from purpose to accumulation. This is hubris in check. Collins' message rhymes with the Bible, and Collins is saying success distorts the organization. So whereas Owen was talking about the idea of success distorts the leader, here he's talking about the success distorts the organization. And the last psychological principle here is psychologist Dacher Keltner, is a psychologist at UC Berkeley, in something he wrote called The Power Paradox, was how we gain power through empathy and service, but then lose empathy once we have it, unless we actively encounter the drift. It's meaning, what often is the thing that got us to success is often the thing that leads us to drift. In this case, particularly the focus on the way up towards empathy and service is that which erodes once that status has been reached. People then who have power are shown to have reduced empathy capacity or accuracy, once there. That power increases one's action orientation, but more towards risk taking, and you move faster, but with less caution. And in many cases, it's moral slippage. High power participants, people with power, break small norms more often with the idea that I'm already here and the rules only apply to other people. And so if, as the Bible tells us, power tilts you towards haste, risk, and self-focus, then we need external limits. That's the horses, wives, and wealth, accumulation, distraction, and power, and daily internal anchors. That's the personal scroll idea to keep the person on task. And so Keltner tells us that power distorts our perception. And then each one of these different psychological concepts, theories, ideas, bring back and loop back and tie back to what the Bible is doing in the first place, which explains the beauty of the limits and not ascribing those limits in the Bible to simply just kings and nations, but to ourselves, to our purposes, and to what it is that we want to accomplish. And so the renewal through limits, as we're coming into this season of renewal, is not against ambition. It's very much pro-sustainability, but it's also pro staying on path. Want to put the crown on? Awesome. Put the seatbelt on with it. Hold yourself in place. And then for today, I know I'm a little bit on the long side. I want to give you two really awesome tools. The simple version of what I'm calling the king's audit. You're the king in this situation. And then a daily anchor. Do the following thing. Take a piece of paper or a postcard, not a postcard, or an index card, and put 3 columns on the card. Label each column horses, wives, or husbands in silver. Horses is reach and power. Wives is, or husbands is indulgence or distraction. And silver is accumulation and wealth. And do a quick scan of yourself. Under each one of the horses, wives, or horses, spouses in silver, write down where you've been multiplying. So if it's in the space of horses, I'm chasing scale, I'm chasing visibility. I'm just reaching for reach's sake. So I'm looking for engagements and impressions and vanity metrics. That's in horses. In the spouses section, what the Bible calls wives, I'm adding partnerships, projects, or purpose or perks that are diluting focus. Where am I doing that? And in the silver space, i.e. with respect to wealth, am I holding resources and reserves without really using them for purpose? So you can write those things down. So if I'm in the horses space and I'm saying, you know what? I'm chasing all the visibility. I'm chasing reach. Okay, let's be honest with ourselves. In the spouses section, in the silver section as well, and then just choose one, not all of them, one, where that multiplication, where that action, the loosening of the restraints has tipped into excess for you, and now set the limit. So maybe it's in, let's say, the spouses section, you realize I have too many projects going on right now. And so I'm going to say the following: no new projects until X is finished, or no new projects during Q4, or I'm going to cap speaking gigs for the rest of this quarter. No more of that, or no more coffees for the sake of having coffee with somebody because I like to and I want to network. I'm setting a limit. It's not about the stopping of your ambition, but it is preventing the drift. And the renewal happens and begins when you name one of those places where your limits have been weakened and you make them stronger. And number 2 is what I'm going to call a daily anchor practice. So we're having the king's audit, which is much larger. And if we work together one-on-one, and I'm happy to do it, we can really take that audit to a much greater scale for you. But the daily practice then is this: each morning before you open the inbox or you go on that feed, write down one line that anchors you during the course of that action. So maybe it's a verse in the Bible, lest your heart be lifted up. You want a humility check. Man does not live by bread alone, as an example of a verse. Maybe it's a leadership mantra or principle. Discipline equals freedom. What you don't change, you choose. All that good stuff. Or maybe it's a single word: limit, anchor, stewardship, joy, happiness, whatever those things are. These are the things that are your single word anchors or limits that hold you in place. Say it or write it down. Writing it down is better because then you see it, and then ask, what would it look like to live this out today? That one decision, the one behavior, the one conversation. So I'm going to go on that social media platform, then I'm going to live the limit. I'm going to live anchoring. I'm going to hold steady against drift. I'm not going to let myself scroll endlessly into doom. I'm going to set myself this personal limit. And when I go into the emails, I'm going to focus, and I'm going to stay focused on the work. My discipline equals my freedom. By getting those things done out of the way, I'm moving forward. This way, you don't just remember the larger king's limits, you're embodying them and you're actively working on them in a micro form on a daily basis. So on the limits that make and keep greatness, which is the title of this week's episode, we're learning something very, very important. There's a tension that we feel. We want to aim higher. We want to step into greatness. We want to take the responsibility and the weight of responsibility on our shoulders. We want to do this. We're taught to live this way. We live in a society that works, and it's okay. But then immediately we have limits. Not too many horses, not too many spouses, not too much money, gold and silver. The Bible is saying go after it, but don't lose yourself in it. Dream big, but don't let the dream eat you alive. Because being the king in any sense of that isn't about getting more. It's really about carrying more. And if you don't set limits, then the very thing that's making you strong can and will undo you. So let's end with a great quote from Jim Collins, but from a different book, Good to Great, which is really a phenomenal read. Greatness is not a function of circumstance. Greatness is largely a matter of conscious choice and discipline. That's the lesson here. The crown looks glamorous, but the crown is full of discipline. So maybe the real question that we need to ask ourselves right now is this: where do I need to put the limits in place, not to hold me back, but to make sure I can actually last, to make sure that I can actually succeed over time, to make sure that I can actually have the impact and the results and the meaning and the significance that I want, and not break before that happens. That is Coaching the Bible for this week. Wishing you an incredibly beautiful and glorious weekend ahead. Look forward to seeing you next week with episode 257.